Welcome to the
Gridiron!
Fruitaloo, my fantasy friends. We're back, the Gridiron podcast, for another episode. Coming at you with some visual. We're in here all logged in. Nice to see you, Elijah. Gabriel.
Yo. Eli's coming to us from Hawaii.
Yeah. Aloha.
All right.
It's the first Gridiron video podcast.
And lots of news to get to. So let's jump into it. And this weekend, we just had our NFL 2021 draft.
Yeah,
takeaways, big names. What interests you the most in regards to fantasy football and incoming rookies?
Yeah, lots of stuff, especially at the top of the draft, fantasy wise. Trevor Lawrence, is he worth picking up?
Oh,
he will be the day one starter in Jacksonville for sure. They've added some weapons for him. Jacksonville's made a lot of moves, made some trades. Also drafted his teammate there in Etienne, running back, which I'm sure we'll talk about here in a second.
Mm-hmm.
Total of 5 first-round quarterbacks. Trevor Lawrence, the Jacksonville Jaguars, #1 overall pick. Zach Wilson, #2 overall pick, going to the New York Jets. San Francisco with that trade up, drafting Trey Lance from North Dakota State. Very interesting pick there. Chicago Bears trade up to grab Justin Fields from Ohio State, and the New England Patriots. Patriots staying patient and landing Mac Jones, who a lot of people thought would be one of those top 2 or 3 quarterbacks off the board. It's the 5th one off the board and lands to New England.
Yeah.
Don't forget too, in round 2, there was a pretty big splash when the Texans drafted Stanford quarterback, which sort of
I think that was round 3, my dude.
Was it round 3?
Yeah, I think so.
Round 3, pick 3, Houston Texans, Davis Mills, Stanford. It is significant. They're
saying that's the death spell for Watson. Like, they wouldn't have done that if Watson was going to stick around.
I don't know.
Well,
I think Watson sealed his own grave doing other things.
That's true. But still,
the news is that Watson might be out for the 2021 season with all of the legal stuff surrounding him this offseason.
Sam, though, last year in our 2 quarterback league, you were hyped on Joe Burrow, who was on the Bengals, who stopped before him, and you were all on the Burrow hype train. Are you on the Trevor Lawrence hype train?
Different situation,
why?
For sure.
Because I feel like you're more reserved, even though arguably Lawrence is better or worse or whatever. Like, similar prospect, better team. Why wouldn't you be higher on Lawrence than Burrow?
I'm not off of Trevor Lawrence. I definitely think he's got a lot of opportunity down there in Jacksonville. New head coach, new offensive coordinator, lots of new playmakers around him. They did draft Etienne, which should make him comfortable to have a running back in the backfield with him. Does make a really big impact when it comes to
he can dump it. He's got that safety valve.
Well, with the other running backs there in Jacksonville, they also brought in Mike Davis this offseason. So Etienne probably.
I don't think it was Mike Davis. I think it's Carlos Hyde there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you're right. Carlos Hyde.
I think Mike Davis is on the Falcons.
Yep.
So, anyways, they brought in a veteran, which made their options open for the incoming draft. They could grab a running back if one dropped to them. They didn't have to. They were probably comfortable going into the season with the 2 running backs that they have. We say between Robinson and Hyde. But Etienne fell farther than what I was expecting, almost to the end of the first round. and makes a good teammate for Trevor Lawrence there. I just think Trevor Lawrence is more of a pure passer, and not as much will do as much with his legs, which Joe Burrow did provide some running ability until fortunate accident where he's basically everything in his knee, MCL, ACL, meniscus, all blown. So he's got some recovery to do. I do like the moves Cincinnati did for Burrow, bringing in his former teammate from LSU, which I think was a really big pickup for him and a nice weapon for him to have in Cincinnati. So
Yeah.
I'm still in on Joe Burrow, actually. Jamar Chase will be nice for him. Nice, reliable target. First wide receiver off the board, too, in this year's draft.
Do you think Jamar Chase makes Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins less of a sure thing when it comes time to draft them?
No, I mean, they got rid of AJ Green. He's off to Arizona this year. We'll talk about that when we get to Arizona's recap and their offseason moves. But it freed up targets. I think Jamar Chase will come in and have plenty of workload. They did also grab a tight end this year, a late round tight end. They don't really have reliable hands there at the tight end position, so I do expect the wide receivers to take the bulk workload.
Yeah,
they have Sample. Yeah,
he was pretty good.
Sample. Was he?
He wasn't fantasy relevant.
Yeah,
he wasn't.
And we're looking at fantasy, potential fantasy production. I don't expect the tight end position to have much production in Cincinnati.
I guess in 3 wideout sets, we noticed a trend in this draft where the NFC West teams took maybe slightly undersized, but slightly overspeeded kind of burner guys as their new kind of wide receiver 3 and their spread sets. What do you think of the new fast guys in the NFC? Because there's quite a few like 5'9", 5'10", 180, like really fast dudes on all the teams.
Yeah, I'm not going to look too much into it now. We'll see how preseason hype gets and see where they land on the depth chart on their respective teams. For example, Seahawks drafted a wide receiver this year with their limited draft picks, their first pick off the board in the 3rd round. Second round, sorry, my bad. Wide receiver. I don't really expect him to have much production. We'll probably be good on the NFL field and will be that change of pace, maybe a returner. But I don't expect a lot of value out of him this year, especially since they re-signed Tyler Lockett for 4 years. And I expect DK Metcalf to take a big leap forward. And they also brought in a tight end this year. Hopefully getting some good production.
OC.
Yeah. I made a couple of changes on the offensive line. Bringing in a Raiders offensive lineman, which should have a nice impact for them. Definitely was hoping for them to do a little more on the offensive line during the draft, but with only 3 picks, not a whole lot you can do.
I like the guy they got in the 6th round, though. He's 6'9". That's enormous. He was so bad.
Do you see the picture of him dressed up as The Rock? Yeah. That's pretty funny.
On Pete Carroll's phone call, it wasn't like DK, where DK is like, "Oh, why'd you wait so long?" He was emotional. He was just pissed. He was like, "Hey, Stone, like we're getting you on the team." He's like, He was so mad that he fell so far. But I think reasonably so, because I think he's pretty good. So I think we scored with him.
We'll see.
Of the other quarterbacks, Trevor Lawrence, definitely a day 1 starter. Coming in the league, we all expect that. Zach Wilson, probably a day 1 starter as well. He will be in competition there in New York, but I think New York is going to be willing to give him the ball sooner rather than later.
Do the Jets even have another quarterback?
I don't think the Jets have anyone else.
Let me check my list. I'll get back to you here in a second.
They traded Darnold, and behind Darnold, they don't have anyone that's ever played an NFL snap.
Yeah,
I think they will be having. I mean, that's the focus, right?
Yeah,
It's gonna be Wilson.
I know we're gonna talk about AFC East more in a sec too, but Jets spent a lot on offense in this draft where they had a lot of capital. So
They had a lot of
they're kind of freshly loaded on offense. So
I think the two after Trevor Lawrence, Trey Lance is definitely was the big move, I think, from the quarterback field, taking a guy from North Dakota State who'd only started 17 games in his college career. And pretty surprising move to move up the draft board for the 49ers, saying that this is the guy they were targeting the entire time. A lot of smoke screens, a lot of misdirection from the 49ers. They ended up pulling Trey Lance, who's got a lot of potential. He can be a big runner, kind of a Cam Newton-esque potential future MVP of the league, but also is kind of a big development project.
I made
We'll
the
have
comparison
as of
to Kaepernick. I think he looks like Kaepernick when he's playing. He's a little longer, and he's got that kind of like galloping but strong speed. Just kind of reminded me of him when he was playing.
Yeah. And I think what it means for the Niners is they're gonna keep Garoppolo for another year to let their new guy sit and learn behind him.
not a whole lot of landing spots for Garoppolo. Most teams have filled their quarterback needs. There was talk about him potentially going into New England, reuniting with Bill Belichick out there, but New England grabbed Mac Jones, quarterback of their own, in their first round. So I don't think that reunion is going to be on the table.
Yeah.
Makes me happy because I think Garopp, we know his ceiling and it's not that high. And so for the Hawks, even with that rookie, I'd rather play Garopp than the new rook. For real. Like, you know what you're getting, and it's not that good. So
Justin Fields also for Chicago. I also think he's going to be year two quarterback. They did bring in Andy Dalton this offseason, and I think they will be comfortable rolling out Dalton at least for the first half of the season. And if they're competitive in the league, which I expect them to be more competitive than they were last year, if they're in the running, I think they'll run with Dalton and hope that he can get them into the playoffs again. So Fields probably a year two quarterback.
well, see, they got Nick
but we
Foles
may-
for the playoffs.
Yeah.
They'll use Dalton to get him there, and then they'll be like, "Foles, it's your time to shine."
Very potentially could be.
Yeah.
Let's turn to running backs from this draft class. To me, there's only 3, maybe 4 that have potential fantasy value this year. First 2 off the board, pick 24 and pick 25. We had Najee Harris from Alabama going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a big, heavy runner, very Derrick Henry-esque. Going to maul some people over. Pittsburgh Steelers, pretty happy with that landing spot as far as fantasy value goes. Your thoughts on Najee Harris?
I think out of all the rookie running backs, this is probably the one you want, because there's not really another situation where he's going to get probably most of the work.
He's going to get every opportunity, I think.
I think he has a fantasy production in the realm of what Jonathan Taylor did last year. I think he's their bell cow. I think they still use like Benny Snell and those other guys, but I don't think they spent a first round on a running back not to kind of grind him to the bone this season. So I think he's kind of like immediately an RB2, honestly.
I was really surprised that he did slip all the way down to pick 24. I was expecting maybe Miami with their second pick in that first round to take a running back there and grab Najee Harris, because I would have loved to see him in Miami, because Miami loves to give all the workload to one guy. That would have been a matchup, fantasy placement I would have loved. But Pittsburgh's not bad. As far as fantasy value goes, I think he will have plenty of ball carrying ability.
He was good in college too. He was really good. Like really, really, really good. He seems like he has the size to translate that to NFL.
And we've seen the Steelers run a running back to the ground before too with Bell, so maybe he can be the same sort of guy.
The next pick off the board, pick 25. We teased it earlier. Jacksonville Jaguars picking up Travis Etienne from Clemson, which is Trevor Lawrence's teammate. Fantasy value you have for Etienne rookie year.
Probably way less than Harris, just based on the fact that he's got James Robinson sharing the backfield with him, who we all saw have a great year last year.
You'd be
So
willing
it's hard to say.
You'd be willing to draft Etienne in what round of this year's draft?
Probably
Seven.
not until the last 5.
Yeah. He's kind of one of those late round flyers for me.
Yeah.
I am going to imagine that people will be disappointed in the first 3-4 weeks of the season when they made some investment on him and thinking they were going to get production when James Robinson's still there. Hyde is there, going to get some workload. He will probably be eased into the season. And so he's one of those trade targets probably after week 4. I'll be looking at to see if he can make a second half push come on towards the end of the season to make an impact. But
Yeah,
the
definitely
Carlos
not
Hyde-
somewhere high up.
The Carlos Hyde situation changes it a lot for me because if it was just Robinson and Etienne, I think one of them, I think it's just a straight up competition. Like they're vying for the bell cow role and the other guy's the change of pace guy. Because Robinson was fine catching the ball last year. It's not like he couldn't catch the ball. He was actually pretty good.
Robinson was amazing.
Yeah.
He had like 95% of the team snaps, more than any other player, and on the worst team. They had
But I think
low
way it looks to me,
opportunity.
like Urban Meyer, he got interviewed after and he said Etienne's our third down change of pace back. And I think he really means it. I think they have Robinson as like 1A and then Carlos Hyde as 1B, and then they have Etienne as like number 2. So to me, he's like the third running back that you'd want on that team, which means that I don't really want him. Like,
Yep.
It kind of reminds me of the Indianapolis Colts situation from last year, where you had 3 running backs. Each of them had relevant weeks. It was hard to trust anyone on a week-to-week basis until the second half of the season when we saw that rookie running back kind of taking over the role there. Yeah, kind of reminds me of that situation a
I
bit.
think he's going to have a very Naheem Hines type role for sure. And I think he'll
Yeah.
get big plays like that too. Like you'll see him come in fresh and like break a bunch of tackles and evade a bunch of people on his like 12 touches that game. Get some points, and then he'll have another game where he gets like 6 touches and doesn't do anything.
Yep.
The only day 2 pick from the running back position came in round 2. Pick 3 from the Denver Broncos, grabbing Javonte Williams out of North Carolina. Again, another big guy, has some good potential here, and pretty good landing spot out in Denver. They got rid of, made some space there. They got rid of,
Lindsay,
what's his name?
Philip.
Philip Lindsay, thank you. So they do have some space there for him to get some running room. Again, I think possibly a second half of the season, making some noise for Javonte Williams.
I think they don't. I'm pretty sure they signed Melvin Gordon to a 2-year contract, right? And I think this is
Melvin Gordon's, he's not very exciting to me. He's kind of
No.
over his peak.
I
Gonna
don't
be a
think they
nice
wanna pay
veteran
him
presence.
again,
Yeah,
is what I mean. I
He'll-
think they drafted
he'll get his-
Javonte to be his heir.
he'll get his work, but nothing that overwhelms me.
Before they drafted Javonte, I was pretty high on Melvin Gordon just because he was one of the few running backs that seems like he's the bell cow, right? Like, I'm not gonna give it to Royce Freeman that much. It's gonna be Melvin Gordon. But sort of second guessing that now. It kind of, to me, more than Javonte has a ton of value, it more kind of just slide Melvin Gordon further and further down for me.
49ers drafting Trey Sermon from Ohio State, round 3, pick 25. Jets picking Michael Carter, round 4, pick 2, out of North Carolina. Any other interests out there? Maybe Kenneth Gainwell from the 5th round, lands with the Philadelphia Eagles with some potential running room there.
Well, the 49ers
Carolina-
also drafted another running back, I think in the 6th round, didn't they? almost positive the Niners got the second running back draft.
Let me look.
I'll look.
Go on to my late rounds. They did. They grabbed Eli Mitchell out of Louisiana Lafayette, round 6, pick 10. But 6th round running back, not quite the capital investment. You're looking at the same for a 3rd round.
Hey,
running
Chris
back.
Carson was a 7th round pick.
Yeah, well,
Mostert was undrafted.
either way, I think that Niners running back room is a bit crowded. So I don't think Sermon is worth much fantasy stock this year. They still have Mostert. They got Jeff Wilson. We've seen them constantly just switch it back and forth between their running backs in prior years. So I don't know. I don't think Trey Sermon's someone I really want on my team.
Any wide receivers? Any wide receiver splashes from this draft class that you guys are really excited about?
The Bengals guy, I think, is going to be great.
Yeah, I
Jamar
agree.
Chase.
Yeah,
I
What
honestly
about,
think all 3 of the top wide receivers who are taken all have great chances to have pretty great years.
How about the Heisman Trophy winner Devonta Smith from Alabama landing with the Philadelphia Eagles?
I think it's a good pick. They really needed a wide receiver, and I think he'll be their number 1 almost immediately because they don't have much else on that offense.
yeah. I
That's
foresee a lot of Jalen Hurts flinging it to Devonta Smith, like ill-advised, like throwing bad balls Smith's way when he's under pressure, like bootlegging out or escaping, and he just flings it to Smith. I bet there's going to be a lot of interceptions. I bet there's going to be a lot of really great catches too.
They'll feed him the ball,
Yeah, definitely.
Which
They'll
is-
feed him the ball.
which is what you want when you have a receiver on your team. You want them to be the top target, getting the looks. Like, it doesn't matter, especially with PPR, like he gets 10 catches for 65 yards. That's a solid week, you know? So if he's the one who's getting 10 looks, 15 looks a game, you want him on your team.
surprised he was the 3rd one off the board. Jamar Chase first with the Bengals at pick 5, and then Jalen Waddle at pick 6 going to the Miami Dolphins. Looking for a real speed burner, probably the closest guy you could get to like a Tyreek Hill type guy. Interesting choice for their Miami Dolphins team.
Well, I mean, when it came down to them, it was between Waddle and Smith, right? And Tua just had more playing time with Waddle when they were both at Alabama. I think they had 2 full years together. Whereas, Smith kind of barely played with Tua. So it makes sense. They kind of did the same thing. Like they got Burrow, his number 1. They got Tua, his number 1, right?
Yeah. And Jalen Hurts also was at Alabama, and they got another Alabama receiver. So everyone kind of gets reunited.
That's true. Jalen Hurts did leave Alabama.
Well, still.
I think it's interesting. I don't know if you guys were watching, but when I saw Devonta Smith's face when he got drafted by the Eagles, he seemed pissed. Like he didn't seem very stoked, and maybe that's just his demeanor. I don't know, but he didn't seem that excited. Which
It's a tough spot.
yeah, and I get it because I think he wanted to go to like the Dolphins. I think he wanted to be on a playoff ready team that's kind of on the ascend, and instead he went to kind of like a flailing team in the worst league. So I get it.
I think he's more disappointed being picked 10, right? He wanted to be, you're the Heisman Trophy winner. I think he was expecting to be kind of a top 5 guy, getting some more investment. I think he was a little disappointed in where he dropped. And just the fact that people are giving him a lot of slack right now about his size. He's probably one of the smallest wide receivers that we've seen in the first round in recent history.
I do think he shows everyone up. I think he has a solid rookie season. I don't know where that means you draft him. Like, where do you guys draft these 3 top wide receivers?
I think Smith is going to be the first one I would look to target, and he would probably be around 6 to 8. Like,
6
he's
to
not going
8.
to hopefully be. He's probably going to be a flex guy, ideally, not my wide receiver 2. That's how I see him.
Sam, you agree?
Yeah, rookie wide receivers just need time to develop and transition to the NFL. I usually don't grab a rookie wide receiver till after round 10, double digit rounds. Take a shot on somebody who you think might break out. A lot of these rookie guys, you'll know after the first week or two, when they'll flash. Somebody like Justin Jefferson last year was undrafted in most leagues and ended up being the best rookie wide receiver we've ever seen. So I don't take a whole lot of stock on rookie wide receivers in the draft. Hopefully, as they break out throughout the season, making the right trades or just looking for opportunity. Eagles are definitely a spot that will have lots of opportunity at wide receiver because of the depth. So,
Speaking of Justin Jefferson, last year I think I took Thielen on the turn between round 3 and 4, so like 40th overall, right? And I think Thielen has somewhat similar value. I think that 40th overall spot is kind of where Thielen should go. But where do you put Jefferson now after this year? Does he go above that? Does he make Thielen less valuable? Like,
He doesn't make
what-
Thielen less valuable, but he's definitely out of the two, the one you want.
for me, I'm taking draft value. To me, they're pretty close. I think they're going to put up similar numbers and have similar production between the two. So I will take whichever one goes second in the draft, just out of value. If one of them goes in the first round and the other goes in the second or third round, I'm taking the guy that goes later.
is it the same for you
Jefferson-
with DK and Tyler? Like, you wouldn't necessarily reach for DK, or do you think DK is a little different of a story?
I think DK is going to go in the first round of our draft no matter what.
Yeah. Just being a hometown team, he'll definitely go earlier than he should. It's hard. The Seahawks wide receivers are so inconsistent, right? They have big booms. Like Tyler Lockett this year, half the games he was league winner games, and half the games he was outside the top 35 wide receivers. He was almost unplayable and hurt your team actually. So it's hard, and we'll see where the Seahawks go. Are they going to go more run heavy? If they're going more run heavy this year, like they say they want to, then I will probably be out on their wide receivers because I just want guys who are consistent in my lineup and put up consistent production.
Yeah, and their new OC, Shane Waldron, like, you don't know what he's going to bring to the table. Like,
if you're in a best ball league where you don't have to set up your lineup, just the best players make your starting lineup, they are great picks for a best ball league.
they really are. I guess let's talk about the NFC East. Yeah, that's our division to scope in on.
Let's do it.
So over the next couple of podcasts, we'll break down division by division, going through teams, looking at the moves that they've made so far this free agency. Starting out in the NFC East, let's start with Buffalo. Some moves that they have made. They did sign.
They signed Mitch Trubisky.
Yeah, they
Yep.
did.
1 year, $2.5 million contract, $1.5 million fully guaranteed. Definitely going to be a backup there, but you think Mitch ever sees the field in 2021?
Not unless Josh goes down.
I do. I think the Bills blow a couple teams out so bad that they throw Mitch in the fourth quarter. Like, I think we see Mitch close out a couple blowout games.
I don't think
Have we
Mitch sees
seen-
meaningful snaps
No,
unless Josh goes down.
Have we seen his last game as a starter in the NFL?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so either. No. And if I were someone like the Jets, I would have lobbied harder for someone like Mitch Trubisky to be on the team, because at this point you could consider him more of a veteran presence, right? He's been around for 4 years, played a lot of games. You'd think you'd want someone like that around for like your new star, Zach Wilson, right? Like, what if, I just think, I don't think he was ever bad, right? He was never terrible. I think he gets another shot.
Yeah, he was kind of bad, but I think he'll at some point get another chance to start a few games for a team that's in an in-between state.
Yeah, like he might go the Tyrod Taylor, Teddy Bridgewater journey where he's like the perennial, like 1 year quarterback dude, Ryan Fitzpatrick guy, you know? But I do think he gets one more shot. Yeah.
They bring in Matt Breida at the running back position. Buffalo seems to be looking for a solution at running back. I don't think they're high on either of the ones they have in their running back room now. Thoughts on bringing in Matt Breida? Does he have any effect in the back room there?
I don't think too much major effect, but either way, I don't think any of the Bills running backs are ones that you necessarily want, just because they all split the time. Like, no one really
Yeah, and Josh Allen
has
is
the
the
major
running
role.
back you want on their team, right? Like
Yeah,
he seemingly he's going to steal 10 rushing touchdowns from running backs this year, right? And that almost makes those backs like it takes away their high upside. Like I don't see any of their backs having a 3 touchdown game. Like maybe they'll have an 80-yard game, but then Josh Allen runs in 3 touchdowns, right?
and it's also impossible to tell, at least I think at this point, which running back is going to do what each game. So you're kind of taking a gamble. Oh, is Zach Moss going to have a big game this week, or is it going to be Singletary, or now is it going to be Breida? Like,
I
it's
think
just
of
a
the 3, I would
crapshoot.
take Breida on my team. I think they paid him for a reason. Like they want him to be the number 1. I don't know if it
I
shakes out that
disagree.
way.
Breida has never been a number 1.
Yeah, just with the amount they paid him, I feel like they want him to be the number 1.
The pass catchers there in Buffalo, we know Stephon Diggs is going to be the number 1 guy there, going to get a bulk of the target load. They lost some good pass catchers this offseason. Andre Roberts out the door. John Brown is out the door. Tyler Croft, their tight end, out the door. And they bring in a couple of guys. They bring in Emmanuel Sanders from the Saints, and they bring in who else did I see there?
Well, they did draft quite a few wide receivers in the late rounds.
They grabbed Jacob Hollister, tight end from Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting. Emmanuel Sanders' impact in the offense. Does he just take over the John Brown role? Is he going to be what do you see his usage there in Buffalo?
Yeah, I mean, I played Emmanuel Sanders last year in crunch time, like when I really needed points in the playoffs. I had Sanders as my flex. He was on the Saints, and he actually came through. He had like a 12-point and a 16-point game. I think he has similar value. I think he's like a surprisingly valuable flex play this year as the number 2 on Buffalo, because I think Buffalo scores a lot of points, and I think Stephon Diggs opens up a lot of free space for him to kind of get open for those 10, 12-yard catches.
Yeah, because Sanders started playing better when Michael Thomas came back, right?
Yeah.
Like when he wasn't the number 1, he got way more open.
Yeah, I don't think he has the
so with another guy
speed.
like Diggs, yeah,
I don't think he has the speed to break out of double coverage very well anymore, but I do think he still can roast some corners one-on-one. He's a really good route runner. And he's pretty good at catching the football. I would take Sanders over like guys that did well last year, like Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins. I think honestly, I'd rather have Sanders on my team at this point. I think he just gets a bigger chunk of the volume on that offense. And I think that offense scores a lot of points.
What round are you looking to grab Sanders?
Probably round 9, maybe round 8. Gabe?
Yeah, I wouldn't want him as anything more than a flex. So I'd say 8 to 10 or beyond that.
Yep. Wide receiver 4. Maybe hopefully have some upside, maybe breaks out a little bit more. How about
But
let's
he's
move
getting
on.
old. He's 34.
Move on to the Miami Dolphins. They also signed a quarterback there in Miami, backup quarterback, presumably in Jacoby Brissett. Signs a 1-year, $5 million contract. They also bring in running back Malcolm Brown from the LA Rams, signing a 1-year deal, $1.75 million, fully guaranteed. And then the big splash, I would say, in free agency for them is wide receiver Will Fuller, bringing over from Houston Texans, signs a 1-year, $10.5 million, fully guaranteed. Another $3 million incentives for him there. So definitely getting some money to Will Fuller, and he will miss, I believe, the first game of the season, still serving his suspension from last year.
From juicing it.
Yeah. I think
I like Will
Will Fuller is a good
on the
option.
Dolphins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you trust the quarterback's ability to get it to him? You trust Tua to hit him with some accuracy? And I mean, he's coming from Deshaun Watson, one of the best in the league. And now in with Tua, we saw relevant pass catchers in Miami when it was Ryan Fitzpatrick. And then Tua came in and the wide receiver fantasy value kind of disappeared. Do you expect him to make that jump in year 2? Have his fantasy wide receivers more relevant?
I think Tua makes the jump. I think
Yeah.
we see more value from the receivers because Tua is going to play a lot better this year.
Tua's going to be a quarterback, top 12 guy, quarterback 1, is a quarterback 2.
I think he's going to be undrafted. And rightfully
he'll-
so, until we see it start being
He'll finish
proven
the
on the
season as
field.
QB 21, something like that. But I don't think that means that his wide receivers don't have really good value, at least 1 or 2 of them. The only problem with Fuller is that Waddle is on the team now. And I think just because of the familiarity that Tua and Waddle had at Alabama, like you'd assume his first look, if he kind of glance over at Waddle, he'd be more familiar, right? And he's probably going to trust him a little more to launch those deep balls. And I think Waddle is actually faster than Will Fuller, even though Will Fuller is supposed to be like the speed guy. Like Waddle is probably the 2nd or 3rd fastest dude in the NFL now. So like, he's probably going to huck it to Waddle. So it makes Will Fuller like a big risk to me, but a risk I want to take. Fuller was crushing it on Travis's team last year. He was really crushing it.
Yeah, I mean, again, had Deshaun Watson and was kind of the DeAndre Hopkins of that team, right? DeAndre left a whole bunch of targets open in Houston. There wasn't a whole lot else to throw to in Houston, and I don't trust them in Miami, especially with them bringing in a top pick at Jalen Waddle. I do think they are going to be more running back heavy because their defense is so good. They also added to their defense in this draft, drafting an edge in the first round, Jalen Phillips at pick 18. In the second round, they grabbed the safety from Oregon, Javon Holland, who I think is going to have a huge impact on their defense and make them even better. I picture them relying on their defense, not running the ball very often. And
The big thing
I
was
don't see
excited about in their draft was that they didn't take a running back, which I was really hyped for, because that means Gaskin is set. Like he's ready to rock. And I think that's their sign, like, yo, we're gonna roll with Gaskin. Like you said, the Dolphins like to give the ball to one guy. I think Gaskin's getting 20 touches a game until he gets hurt. And if he doesn't get hurt, I think he's got RB1 potential. I think he's a pretty solid RB2 in the draft. Like Gaskin is
Malcolm Brown not making an impact there in Miami.
No.
Just a depth
Not
piece.
enough to take away from Gaskin.
I think
or Ahmed.
They have Savon Ahmed as their number 2, and all these teams saw all the running backs get hurt last year, right? And so everyone is like assuming they're going to be down to RB3 at some point in the season. They don't want it to be some kid off the street. They want it to be, someone who can run the ball. I don't think Malcolm Brown is terrible, but I think it's Gaskin, Ahmed, Brown. Like if I draft Miles Gaskin Brown or whatever, it's gonna get his handcuff, I would take Ahmed, wouldn't take Brown. So I'm pretty stoked on Miles Gaskin, honestly. After this draft, I think it's like full green light on him. One of the only running backs that I like more after the draft than I did before.
They did grab a running back right there at the end, Jared Dokes, out of Cincinnati, in their 7th round, 17th pick, 244th overall. Probably not a whole lot to look into on him, but it is interesting. They did pull one right there at the end.
Yeah, I just meant they didn't spend one of those first 3-round picks on one of the running backs people expect to have an impact this year, Yeah. I'm stoked on Gaskin. I think Gaskin actually makes Tua a lot more valuable. I think we're going to see some check downs go for touchdowns. I think that's going to boost Tua's value in a few games.
All right, let's move to the New England Patriots, who I think is the most interesting team to talk about in the NFC East, with the moves that they made. Start at the quarterback position, where they did re-sign Cam Newton to a 1-year deal worth up to $13.6 million. So definitely a lot bigger contract than he had last year. They also re-signed James White and bring in Nelson Aguilar, and they bring in 2 tight ends. Hunter Henry, which a big splash, $37.5 million contract that includes a $25 million fully guaranteed. And they also bring in tight end Jonnu Smith, 4-year, $50 million deal, including $31.25 million fully guaranteed.
Yeah, they did a lot of work in the free agency. And honestly, I think they're going to be a playoff contending team once again. I don't know how the quarterback situation is going to look, with Newton looking pretty bad at times last year. I don't know if they roll with him to start and just wait until he shows those same flashes of terribleness and they throw in Mac Jones. But I think that's less important because their offense looks great to some extent beyond the quarterback.
Newton's a weird one because I think he finished the season, even though he had like historically terrible passing year. Wasn't he still QB 14 or maybe 15?
His relevance was purely on
12 rushing
running
touchdowns.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that rushing ability has gone anywhere. I think he's the same guy he was last year, but he has like 4 to 5 new viable, like serious, like dudes to huck the ball to. I think like more and more Cam Newton is sneaking up. I didn't get one of those top 5 quarterbacks I really like. Like in a later round, I could see doing what Sam did last year, which is taking Cam Newton late. And
well, do you think Newton's going to start all year with Mac Jones in the wings?
I do.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think Belichick rolls out Mac Jones, even if Cam Newton gets hurt. I don't think he puts him out there.
I think
Really,
what's really interesting to me in New England is their moves that they made in free agency, bringing in 2 top tight ends, which I was disappointed to see at first because I was hoping they would land to more relevant teams where they'd have fantasy value. I don't think either tight end you're able to start in New England. There's just not enough passing volume with Cam Newton. Cam Newton only had 3 passing touchdowns the entire year last year. That's
which
it.
is hilarious.
3 passing touchdowns. So there's just not enough fantasy value as far as the pass catchers in New England with Cam Newton. But what it shows me is that they invested on, I think they're going to make the switch to a 12 personnel on their offense. And I think they're going to really get behind the Cam Newton play style of the read option and really pounding the rock. And their defense is coming back. They had, out of all the teams last year that opted out, New England had the biggest impact, especially on the defensive side with all the guys that opted out. They'll be back this year. Their defense is going to be back. They're going to be solid. And I think they're going to be pounding the rock, and which to me is interesting that they pulled the trigger on Mac Jones, because he's the opposite of what Cam Newton is. And I feel like they made all these changes to go 12-person personnel and go run heavy, and then they get a pure pocket passer in Mac Jones, who's not going to be able to run the read option. And I think they're going to have to make the adjustment again, next year or the year after, when he is ready to come into play.
I think the Patriots see themselves as having a real chance to make a deep playoff run with Newton the next year or two. Like, I think Belichick really believes in Newton. And I think all the changes they made really raised his value. I think they raised Damian Harris's value as well. Their rook from last year that looked really good. Arguably, that is one of the more crowded running back rooms, and the Patriots normally kind of spread it between their backs, right? But I could see taking a chance on running Harris out there. I don't think you get two massive tight ends for no reason. I think that means they're gonna be like overloading the offensive line and going run heavy quite a bit.
Yep, which sucks for fantasy, because you would hope that finally great free agency for tight ends, Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith. Hopefully they go somewhere where they're going to have fantasy value. And instead of getting more fantasy relevant tight ends, we now have less. I think we have 2 less off the board, which just, to me, skyrockets Travis Kelce and George Kittle and Mark Andrews and Darren Waller. It skyrockets their value even more, knowing that there's 2 less relevant tight ends in the league.
They almost did the opposite of what the Hawks did. Like, the Hawks let, I think, 4 tight ends go, and they signed one guy who you assume was going to be the guy, right? Like, Gerald Everett is kind of the guy. He's the guy. I don't think the Hawks offense gives him the ball that much, but he's like just the clear number 1 tight end on the team, and they like shut out all of the noise. And the Patriots did the opposite. They made it way more crowded, added a ton of noise. Now you can't play them. It's not like where you had Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, where they both had value for a couple of weeks there. I don't think that's ever the case.
Is there anyone on the Patriots roster you want?
I think it's Cam Newton.
Yeah, he's probably the only one. Nelson Aguilar is interesting. They paid him a bunch of money to be the wide receiver 1 there. We saw Nelson Aguilar last year go to the Oakland Raiders and be a pretty solid number 1 for them. So maybe Aguilar, and I might take a stab. We'll see after a couple weeks of the season between Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. Maybe one of them does emerge as the pass catcher. Maybe.
If it was, it would be Jonnu Smith, don't you think?
It's a toss-up right now to see on who would be the guy.
I think Nelson Aguilar either has a crazy awesome season or a dead season. I think Belichick has done some good stuff in the past with one number 1 wide receiver, namely like Randy Moss, right? And he kind of paid him like he expects him to be Randy Moss. Number 2 for the Patriots. Is Aguilar worth a late round flyer?
Yeah. He's Julian Edelman's looking like, I don't think it's official yet, but he's retiring.
He did announce it.
They don't have. He announced it, but the paperwork's aren't signed. I'm sure right before the season he's going to sign with Tampa Bay and reunite with Tom Brady.
Absolutely.
So there's not really anyone else out there pass catcher wise that I'd want in New England. They did also bring in Kendrick Bourne. Did pay him quite a bit of money, $22.5 million for 3 years. But there's just not a big enough passing pie in New England for me to be excited about anyone there.
Yep.
So let's move on. Last team in the NFC East, we have the New York Jets, who again made the big splash in the draft, signing a quarterback 2nd overall in Zach Wilson. This offseason and free agency, they've added or re-signed Josh Adams, their running back. They also brought in running back Tevin Coleman from the 49ers, signed a 1-year, $1.1 million deal. Only $400,000 is guaranteed, so a really cheap contract for them and Tevin Coleman. They could run him into the ground on that cheap cost there. They have done their best to bring in pass catchers to upgrade this offense. They've brought in Keelan Cole. They also brought in Corey Davis and brought in Tyler Kroft, tight end from Buffalo Bills. Corey Davis being the big name there, signing 3 years, $37.5 million. Presumably coming in to take over that number 1 role. Sam Darnold's out, new quarterback in. Fantasy value in New York this year.
It's hard to say because there's so many new pieces being introduced. Like last year, we made fun of Joe when he started 3 Jets because we all knew there's nothing to go there with the Jets. But new quarterback, we have no idea what he's going to look like, and he's going to be for sure the day 1 starter. And if he plays well, who knows what that means for their receivers?
Quarterback was
Yep,
kind of
and they
a
had-
swinging type guy. He's got a big arm and he hucks it. So I think Corey Davis actually kind of has sneaky good value there. I think if anyone's scoring touchdowns, it's going to be Corey Davis. Their backfield, though, I really, really don't like it. They did end up drafting, I think, 2 running backs in later rounds as well.
Yeah, so they had 10 picks in this year's draft, which is pretty great. They did make some questionable moves, trading picks around. They gave up a lot to move up at certain spots, which I think was a little foolish. They added offensively, they added a guard in their first round, which is Barrett Tucker from USC. Is going to be adding a lot to that offensive line. They drafted Elijah Moore, wide receiver from Mississippi, in round 2, and they drafted Michael Carter, running back from North Carolina, in round 4. Definitely some big moves offensively, and then just adding depth pieces throughout the draft for them as well, mostly on the defensive side after that. In fact, their last 6 picks were all defensive players. So new running back, Michael Carter, and new wide receiver Elijah Moore, as well as adding to that offensive line.
And new
rookie quarterback, who Zach Wilson does have a good arm, pretty accurate, should be able to hit the guys in space. To me, Jets are just a wait and see. There's too much mystery for me to invest a lot of capital. They are going to be my dart throws kind of at the end of the draft. Maybe on Corey Davis, maybe on Elijah Moore. I like him as a prospect.
But do you dart throw on their running backs?
Which one do you take?
Coleman.
You take their new rookie, Tevin Coleman, Josh Adams.
Carter, the new rookie. Because we've seen Josh Adams and we've seen Tevin Coleman, and they're nothing like special. So if you're
Coleman had some good years in Atlanta, like 3 years ago.
6 years ago?
Do they still? I mean, I think they still have Le'Veon Bell there,
No, he's in the Chiefs.
right?
He's the chief.
Did he move?
He moved last year
to the Chiefs. It was a big deal.
You want to? Yeah.
He won the Super Bowl. He went to the Super Bowl.
He was on their Super Bowl roster with them.
Chiefs. Speaking of the Chiefs also signed Jerick McKinnon. So Coleman and McKinnon, went very different places. If I was Coleman, I'd be a little mad that I ended up on the Jets, and not
Who
on the
got
Chiefs
paid more?
with McKinnon. I don't think
Looking
he
at the-
can get paid less than what Coleman got paid.
Early.
Looking at the depth chart here in New York, we have Tevin Coleman listed as the starter for now. Michael Carter as their backup, and then Ty Johnson, the 3rd string, and Josh Adams, 4th string. Again, that could all change going into the season, but as of now, probably Tevin Coleman and then Michael Carter maybe as a potential breakout second half guy.
man.
Yeah, I think overall, we probably should have a higher outlook on these Jets players this year because I think their new QB is gonna provide more value to all these players than what we saw last year.
Do we have
That's
time
true.
to tackle another division here?
Yeah, let's
Let's
do
do
it.
the South, AFC South.
Yeah.
All right, let's move to the South. First up on the docket, there is the Houston Texans.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
what's going on with the Texans this
I'm gonna make a
offseason?
big claim about the Texans. They're gonna be the worst team in football this year.
I don't
really
think that's a big
so.
claim. I think that's
Okay. Well,
a
I've put
standard
money
view
on-
among football fans.
So free agency moves for the Houston Texans. They
Yeah.
bring in a couple of quarterbacks. They bring in Ryan Finley, acquired in a trade with the Bengals. They also brought in Tyrod Taylor, signing a 1-year, $5.5 million deal. They bring in running backs. They bring in Mark Ingram, signed a deal worth up to $3 million, including $500,000 signing bonus. They bring in running back Philip Lindsay, signs a 1-year deal worth $3.25 million. They bring in wide receiver Chris Conley, Andre Roberts, Dante Moncrief. Yeah, a lot of
There's
moves.
one Texan who I want on my team next year, and it's Brandon Cooks. And that's it.
Do you want Brandon, even if Watson is out?
Yes, because Brandon Cooks was still good even when he was with Jared Goff. And Jared Goff is not that good. I don't think Jared Goff's better than Tyrod Taylor. So I expect Cooks to be right around that like wide receiver 20 range again. I think he has a pretty solid season. And I think David Johnson sucks. And I think Philip Lindsay sucks there. I don't think they're going to be competitive in games where they're running the football much either.
I really like Philip Lindsay as a player,
Me too.
but in Texas, it's hard to trust anyone, especially if Watson is out. I will probably be out on all players down there.
Yeah.
Even
And
Brandon Cooks?
they're all veterans. Mark Ingram, Philip Lindsay, Andre Roberts, Dante Moncrief. These are guys mid to late in their careers. And I know there's a new coach down there, and they're going to be shaking things up down in Texas. This seems like a gap year for them that they are going to tank, get some high draft capital maybe for 2022, and I don't really want any piece of it. I will say David Johnson was a lot better last year for fantasy than we remember. He finished as a running back 2, pretty solid and pretty consistent. Double-digit fantasy points most every week. Didn't win you any weeks. Didn't have those big explosion games like he did his rookie and sophomore years in the league, but was better for your fantasy team than you would think.
He was the David Montgomery of last year. David Montgomery was awesome last year.
Yeah. Quiet, reliable. I think most of that goes away with the amount of new hands to feed in that backfield.
Yeah, I think Lindsay takes away too many valuable touches. And I think
Ingram's still solid.
I think Mark Ingram's there as more of like he's an awesome guy and they want someone cool on the team to like make the team, like a veteran presence to keep the locker room good and stuff. But I still think they feed him the ball, right? Like the Ravens still fed him the ball last year, even though it wasn't that much. I'm surprised you guys are so low on Brandon Cooks. He's in.
It's their
on a lot
quarterback
of-
situation.
If Watson is there, I'm fine with getting Cooks probably fifth round, 6th round, somewhere one of those mid tier running backs or wide receivers. If Watson is out, I'm out. I don't really. I'll stick away.
Interesting. I mean, Gabe drafted Keenan Allen last year pretty high, even though Tyrod Taylor was the quarterback. Do we think Tyrod's that bad?
Keenan is just that good. Keenan's a lot better NFL product than Brandon Cooks is.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Are we drafting Tyrod?
No. With only a one quarterback league, I think the quarterbacks are definitely all going to be studs that we're starting, and we're not going to see much of these like flyer QBs starting week in and week out
True.
for any team.
Around the QB 10 mark is like Justin Herbert, like Tom Brady, right? Where guys you'd be super happy rolling out as your starter.
The quarterbacks don't drop off until I think well after we stop starting them, unlike other positions.
I agree.
Other moves in Texas, there's way too many to count. They've signed 6 guys for their offensive line. They've signed 6 guys on their defensive line, free agent signings. Shaq Lawson being a big one. Justin Britt they brought in for their offensive line, and Lane Taylor for their offensive line, which should boost their line quite a bit. They bring in Desmond King at cornerback, Terrence Mitchell. Really have a lot of defensive signings as well. We'll see what kind of impact they have. Again, a lot of them are 1-year deals. Most of them actually are 1-year deals.
Real quick, circling back to the Bills, who invested heavily on defense. Bills already had a great defense last year. I actually think Bills sliding, like more and more, I'm looking at the Bills as a defense I'd like to go on every week. They spent their draft capital on defense.
They did.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Indianapolis Colts, unless there's any other thoughts on the Texans.
I think a final thought is probably stay away because it's going to be a rough year for them.
Yeah,
agreed.
They're what the Jets were last year.
All right, Colts,
Terrible.
big splash at quarterback here for Indianapolis Colts. They get rid of Jacoby Brissett. They get rid of Philip Rivers. Thank you. He retired this year, and bringing in through trade with the Philadelphia Eagles, they grab Carson Wentz. Big quarterback change here. I love Wentz as a NFL quarterback. I don't think the last couple of seasons were really his fault because he's had no pass catchers in Philadelphia, and I don't think he was there to succeed. I do think he's going to be reemergent here in Indianapolis, and I expect for him to have a real big bounce back year.
I agree, and he's reuniting with the coach, his OC, when he had his nearly MVP level season.
Best season ever for sure.
If there was any landing spot for Wentz, this is the best one he could have ended up in. So
I mean, Colts have a great offensive line too, and he has great run support. He has multiple pass catchers that are worthy of being like wide receiver 2 level, right? I don't think he has a true standout number 1. But he's got a good crew. I'm pretty high on Wentz. I have Wentz as like QB 12 right now, like just outside of like starting in our league, but someone who like I could see getting picked up on waivers after having a big week 1, you know.
They re-signed Marlon Mack to a 1-year deal. They re-signed T.Y. Hilton, and they bring in a couple of guys for their offensive line: Julian Davenport, Sam Tevy, Chris Reed, all for their offensive line. Probably not big impact guys for your line, but will add to their depth chart there. In the draft, they were more defensive heavy. Their first 2 rounds were defensive players. They grabbed an edge in the first round and a defensive end in the second round. Round 4, pick 22, they did grab a tight end, Kylan Granson, out of Southern Methodist University, 127th pick overall. Don't think he'll have much of an impact. They've got a pretty good tight end room, lots of guys to throw to in Indianapolis already.
I'm pretty I'm pretty high on Pittman, who was a guy we thought might have like a Justin Jefferson like season last year, right? Like he had pretty high ceiling, and he didn't really shine the way we thought he would. But when I watched Colts games, Pittman looked really good. Like he looked like the guy. So
Yeah,
when I say high on Pittman, I mean he's the guy I'd want to take that dart throw on this year, like more so than T.Y. Hilton.
totally. I
I
had
think
Pittman on my
Pittman's the
team.
dude.
I threw him in to my starting lineup a couple times and he didn't like terribly disappoint. I could
Yeah.
see that like the value could be there. If honestly, I think if his quarterback situation was better, because I don't think Philip Rivers was the ideal guy to be throwing to him. And maybe with Wentz, that really improves because yeah, T.Y. Hilton, he's getting up there in age. He's the burner type. Pittman can be the, let's get a first down, let's throw to Pittman.
Yeah, the Tyler
Let's
Lockett.
get him. Yeah.
I think Pittman has a big year this year. I liked him as a prospect last year. Philip Rivers just was at the end of his career. His arm was not what it used to be, and I think with Carson Wentz coming in, he'll find some new life there.
Agreed.
I think Pittman's gonna have a 1,000-yard season, and maybe he gets 4
That's a
touchdowns, but
great.
maybe he gets like 12 touchdowns, and I think that's where he goes from like wide receiver 30 to like 15. I think he has a pretty big range, but there's a lot of upside there, I think. And then with the running back situation, I think everyone was hoping they wouldn't re-sign Marlon Mack, right? Like everyone didn't want them to sign Marlon Mack, just because everyone wants to draft Jonathan Taylor as like a low-end RB1, like the end of middle second round, end of first, like everyone wants Jonathan Taylor to be that guy. I'm
Yep.
not sold on Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, I'm not either, but where do you see him going? Because in our mocks, he's going in the first round every single time. He's going mid first. First pick.
He'll be somewhere on that turn. The last 3-4 picks of the first round, or the first 3-4 picks of the second round.
Yeah, he's a guy like last year, like Miles Sanders for me. Like I see the value there at the end of the first round, start of the second round, but I didn't want it, like if he fell to third round, I'd be stoked, but I'm just not pulling on Jonathan Taylor. I think Nyheim Hines is too good, and I think Marlon Mack is too good. And it's not like the situation with Chubb and Hunt is very unique, where they're both valuable. Like Hunt doesn't seem to bleed Chubb's value and vice versa. Whereas I do think Mack hurts Jonathan Taylor. Like you can see a couple series a game where Marlon Mack's in there, and now Taylor gets 14 touches instead of 22, So pretty lame they signed Marlon Mack.
So you're staying away, even if he's there for you at the end of the first.
If he's there at the start of the third, I think you have to. Just like
he's not going to be there at the start of the third.
No way.
Yeah,
he won't make it.
I mean, we said that
halfway
about
through
Joe
the second
Mixon
round
last year, and Joe Mixon made it to Sam at the start of the third. Same with DeAndre Hopkins for you, Gabe. He made it into the third. Our drafts go wonky sometimes.
I don't know how much of that was our draft, but just general ESPN mocking.
True.
For Hopkins to fall. If players are mocked high, they'll be picked in our league because people tend to pick who they see at the top of the draft board.
That's true.
I don't think there would be 10 people who consistently choose someone other than the top ranked player.
Yeah.
All right, let's move it on to the Tennessee Titans. Not a whole lot of moves to talk about in Tennessee. Should be pretty quick. They're going to be running it back. They lost Corey Davis, and they ended up signing Josh Reynolds from the LA Rams to a 1-year deal. They lost their tight end, Jonnu Smith, and they signed their backup tight end, Anthony Ferkser. They agreed to new terms. They also bring in Jeff Swain or I guess they re-signed him for a one-year deal, $2.5 million. I do think they like Anthony Firkser there at tight end. I expect him to have kind of a big year with, if there's a new fantasy tight end that becomes relevant this year, Firkser is definitely on my watch list. Taking over the Jonnu Smith's role. I think they like him more than they like Jonnu Smith. So going to be on my watch list. Couple of offensive tackles that they brought in, and again in their draft focused mostly on defense and a little bit on the offensive line. They signed a couple of wide receivers in the draft, a 4th rounder in Des Fitzpatrick out of Louisville, and who they traded up for, and then a 6th round pick, Racy McMath out of LSU. Probably not going to make too much of an impact this offseason, but I think Titans are still Derrick Henry.
Absolutely.
I mean, they're also AJ Brown, right? Like,
Yep.
I think losing Corey Davis actually makes AJ Brown more valuable this year, if anything.
Yeah, and you got to remember, AJ Brown last year was hurt, missed the first 4 games of the season, came back, was still dealing with injuries pretty much throughout the whole season, had surgery in the offseason, and should be back to healthy. And when he's healthy, he's a beast. He's going to be running through guys, blitzing it down the field. I was probably the highest on him all last year. I drafted him in every league I could. Was disappointed that he had some injuries to deal with, but I'll be back on AJ Brown again this year, taking him wherever I can.
I think he represents the value that you want from a DK like player without that high draft pick needing to get used, right? Like, he's someone you could maybe get in the 3rd round and he could be your wide receiver 1, whereas DK is going to go way too high. You'd have to give up taking someone like Aaron Jones or Austin Eckler to take DK, right? And you wouldn't do that. What about good old Tannehill? He was pretty good last year. Are you going to draft Tannehill?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be opposed to it.
Yeah, I would see him right at the end of that QB1 range, somewhere between quarterback 8 and 12, falling in that sweet spot. He's some guy. I think he's just got stink on him from his Miami days under Adam Gase, and nobody wants to trust him as a elite quarterback. But will you look at comparing his games to any of the top quarterbacks? I think he finished quarterback 7 last year. I mean, he's just really consistent and great production, and yeah, I love him at quarterback for fantasy.
Where are you drafting
Same.
Derrick Henry? As in, obviously he's top 5. Is he number 1?
I think
No.
there's a claim to be made for number 1, though.
The guys that I want to have to, especially with half point PPR, they got to be able to catch the ball. Derrick Henry's just not going to be his upside is limited, and I will say
Limited to
running
number
back.
1?
No running back holds up to that much workload. I do think, as amazing as Derrick Henry is, he's going to miss some time eventually here. He hasn't missed any time in the last couple of seasons, and it's his time. Every elite running back, no matter who you are, you deal with injuries. That's part of being a running back in the NFL. So I don't want to take him on the year that he goes down.
Sam,
So,
who would you take number 1?
McCaffrey is still number 1. He's got that role, pass catcher. Saquon's really
McCaffrey
high up there
obviously
for
number
me.
1.
And Dalvin Cook, again, involved in any Alvin Kamara. These guys who contribute to the passing game are huge. You can't underestimate passing work from the running back position.
Wouldn't there be an argument to be made that having not been injured so far in his 1,000 touches means that he's less likely to get injured next year versus all the other guys who have had season-ending injuries.
I don't, and you got to keep in mind that Derrick Henry is older too. He's only been relevant for a couple of years. It's because he sat back his first couple of years behind DeMarco Murray and didn't get a lot of running room. You know, he didn't really become a starter till he was 26.
He's 29 now, right?
27.
And 27, that's it?
Yep.
He was a little bit older than that. But he gets 300, 350 carries a year. I don't care who you are. You're not going to hold up to that workload in and out every single year.
I don't
You're just
know.
not.
For me, it wouldn't surprise me if McCaff, Dalvin Cook, Kamara, Saquon got hurt. Like, I'd be like, yep, makes sense. But if Derrick Henry gets hurt, I'd be like, what? What? Like, how is that possible? I don't know. He seems like the safest guys to me. Doesn't he?
No, it's time. It's his time. Unfortunately, I don't want it to happen. I want him to be there for fantasy.
Gotcha.
He doesn't make it past pick 5, pick 6 at the latest. But there's just I'd much rather have the upside of a pass catcher that can break the big
So
plays,
say-
the Dalvin Cook,
say it
the Alvin
comes-
Kamara.
Say it comes to pick 6. It goes McCaff, Cook, Kamara, Saquon, Devontae Adams. And now it's you, and you have pick 6, and all those other running backs are gone. And Devontae Adams.
Yeah,
is gone.
at pick 5, I would take him over Devontae Adams.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, he doesn't drop out of the top 5. Don't
Okay.
hear what I'm not saying. Derrick
Okay.
Henry's elite. He's a top 5 pick, but
Okay.
of top 5, he's my 5.
Gotcha.
Right? There's the other guys that I just want above him. Does he get another 2,000-yard season? Statistically,
Yes.
probably not. Right? That extra
He's gonna
game,
do it.
maybe.
He's gonna have a 3,000-yard season though.
So, yeah, we'll see. I love Derrick Henry. If I'm there at pick 5, I'll definitely be grabbing him. But
Are
there's
there
I want a
any
guy.
other? Are there any other pass catchers, Titans, who you're considering drafting?
Outside of AJ Brown, they really have nothing.
I like Ferkser, like I said, at tight end.
Yeah,
he can make
But
them.
receiver wise, Josh
They
Reynolds.
drafted a couple. Not so much Josh Reynolds. They drafted a couple of guys in their draft here.
If they're playing the
Um,
Seahawks, I'd start Reynolds.
Yep.
And we do play the Titans this year, don't we?
There you go. Pick him up for one game.
Yep.
Let's move on to our last team of the day, last team of the NFC South, AFC South, my bad, is the Jacksonville Jaguars, who there's a lot to be said of Jacksonville, new head coach, we've teased a lot of it. They're going to have new quarterback from day one. They have also brought in CJ Beathard to a 2-year contract as a backup. Don't imagine him seeing the field. They signed Carlos Hyde. They brought in Travis Etienne in the draft. Wide receiver, they also brought in Philip Dorsett, and they brought in Marvin Jones, who I think was a great signing for them. Marvin Jones should be able to take the top off the defense and have some of those deep balls from Trevor Lawrence. I like everything they're doing in Jacksonville. They also add to the defensive end. They bring in Shaquille Griffin, which I thought was a huge signing for them. They bring in safety Rashawn Jenkins, paying him $35 million.
They brought in Shaquille Griffin.
Yeah.
Shaquille Griffin, 3-year, $44.5 million, $29 million guaranteed. So their defense should be on lockdown this year as far as the corners go between Jenkins and Griffin.
I think the big thing for me is that DJ Chark is now less relevant than Marvin Jones, especially with an upgrade at quarterback for them and Lawrence. I think Marvin Jones is actually sneakily a really good pick. What do you guys think?
He has been for years. Like he's always overlooked, I feel like, and he puts up solid numbers. Probably just because he
He-
played for the Lions, like a forgettable team. And now he's on another forgettable team, the Jags. So if you can sneakily snag him, I think he's a solid starter.
He's older. I believe he's over that 30 mark. So that will
Let's see.
bring him down
Yeah,
a
he's
little bit.
31.
Yep.
I guess- Between Chark and Jones, who are you taking? Not
For
Chark.
me, it's actually I'm probably leaning more towards Laviska Chenault, just because I think he'll have better draft day value. He's not going to be the flashy name he pulls out of there. He had a
Mhm.
pretty good rookie season last year for what he was, and I expect him to have a good jump in year 2 with Trevor Lawrence. He's the kind of guy that you hit in stride, and he makes plays in space. He's got elite speed. He's going to get some end around carries and try and hit that edge. I think out big years coming for Chenault.
out on Chark.
Perhaps.
I don't know why.
Because he's
Again,
going to
he
be
dealt with-
drafted too
Chark.
high.
He dealt with injuries last year. It's hard to hold guys who deal with injuries. They're playing against them. We got to kind of remember they can, when they're healthy, they're healthy. Like Julio Jones, he was hurt last year, right? When he's healthy, he's still elite. We haven't seen him lose a step on the field. We've just seen him deal with some injuries. So don't count him out yet. With better quarterback play there, Chark is the kind of guy who goes up and grabs the ball. He's tall, he's big, he can body some people. So we just got to see who Trevor Lawrence gravitates to and what this offensive system is with Urban Meyer. It will be really interesting to see that successful college coach and bringing that collegiate style into the NFL and see if it translates at all or if it's a big flop. We'll see.
I'm envisioning a lot of giant bombs from Trevor Lawrence deep down the field. I don't know why, but I'm seeing like a lot of 40-yard in the air throws. I just don't know who it's going to, you know? Is it Jones or is it Chark? I just have a feeling like it might be Jones.
It's probably going to be a
Well-
bit of a mixed bag.
We'll see.
Where would you place Robinson in the draft now that he's got some serious competition?
Yeah, I think this is, as far as fantasy goes, this is one of the hardest guys to rank. Robinson should be a first rounder, in my opinion, before this. Even though his name value and people don't like him because he's an undrafted rookie who had a big breakout year last year. He's probably would have gone typically in drafts in the second round somewhere. I think he probably drops another round. I think he probably drops down to the third round just because that risk of the I don't know factor. Etienne's a big name, rookie name. But Robinson was elite last year.
Yes, he was.
Especially he ran behind the 32nd ranked offensive line and and to put up that kind of production on a team that was terrible and had the least amount of running attempts of any team last season. So with the least amount of attempts, he had like one of the best productions. So I love him as a player.
I think there's a
But his
chance
yeah.
that they develop into like a Chubb Hunt kind of role, with Etienne being the Kareem Hunt and Robinson being the Chubb. I do think there's a chance they both have top 20 value. Maybe not this year, maybe next year, because I think Etienne takes a while to get going.
So you're still interested in Robinson on your team. You don't feel like it.
I would like to have him as
You'd
my
still start him.
RB2 if you could get him late. If that makes sense. Because I think he represents good value in the draft now. I think people will overreact to the Etienne signing.
I think he'll consistently be pulled at the beginning of the third round.
See that?
Excited for the Jaguars, though. They should be a fun team to watch this year.
Yeah.
I think
I hope
Any other
they'll
Lawrence does
thoughts?
well.
Yeah. One of the most interesting
wrap-
teams for sure.
Wraps up the NFC South, AFC South, and it's about all the time we have for our pod today. Next pod, we'll get to the other two divisions in the AFC. Should be good times.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Yeah. This has been
I
the
hope you like
Gridiron.
the new format.